Myself, Dr. Rajesh Singh. First of all, I warm welcome our eminent speaker, Mr. Vikas Singh, who is the renowned advocate at the Honorable Supreme Court of India, and he is the president of the Supreme Court Bar Association also. So first of all, the topic of this webinar is migrant workers and the pandemics. And on this virtual platform, this is the view to all the viewers of the Parul Institute of Law, the student of Parul Institute of the Law and Parul University also. So let me speak about Advocate Vikas Singh sir. He is completed his early schooling from St. Joseph Convent High School, Patna. And after that, he enrolled himself as a Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar Bihar University, from where he completed his graduate course in law. He is one of the prominent lawyer in the country and is known for the fighting for the many high-profile cases in his career. Recently, he was hired by the Sushant Singh father for the Sushant mysterious suicide case. Recently, he got elected as the president of the Supreme Court Bar Association (SCBA) and as a senior advocate at the Supreme Court. And Mr. Vikas Singh has also written to the Chief Justice of India S.A. Bobde, using him to resume the physical hearing of the case in the Supreme Court at earliest in the view of improving COVID-19 situation. So on this platform, I warm welcome to you, sir. Now I will say Dr. Akhil Sayyed, sir, who is the Director and Dean at Parul Institute of Law, Parul Institute, to warm welcome our speaker, Mr. Vikas Singh.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh. Thank you, Dr. Rajesh. Namaskar. Learned Advocate Shri Vikas Singh Saab. It is our great pleasure that the President of Supreme Court Bar Association is at our doorstep. It's a pleasure moment for us. And today the pleasure is due to that particular day also. We, at least in Gujarat, sir, we are celebrating our foundation. And in addition to all these two good things, we internationally observe the International Labour's Day today only. And that is how we shared with Dr. Rajesh that we should discuss something on labor issues. And when I come to know that your good self has kindly agreed for this topic to work to talk on a migrant worker, so it's a really we are thankful to you for your kind gesture and sparing your valuable time from busy schedule of Supreme Court proceedings. So this is going to be a very wonderful session. I am sure the student will learn so many things because it is from the lawyer and the practitioner professional, which an academician can never fill up the gap. So once again, thanking you, sir. I welcome you on Parul Institute of Law. And once the pandemic is over, I welcome you at for your physical visit also. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
So on this occasion of Labor Day, now I will tell our speaker, Mr. Vikas Singh, to elaborate on this topic. Sir, in the last 15 minutes, the student will ask certain question to you, sir, and it will be put on my WhatsApp and I will put to you, sir, because all the students are listening on this Facebook live, sir. So now this session is handed to you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Rajesh Singh and Akhil Saab. It is always a pleasure to talk to youngsters and to the aspiring lawyers of this country, because one feels that this is one way to give back to the system and ensure that the children can also benefit from whatever I have done in my life or whatever my feelings are on a particular subject, and if they can use that in their own setup. This topic that you have selected is a very, very important topic of this country for the last 1 year. And I have a very strong feeling on this topic, and that is why I probably agreed to, deliver this lecture and participate in this webinar. Because today, the way the pandemic is raging, our members are facing lots of misery and losing almost a member every hour. And Delhi is very, very bad. But only for this reason I accepted, because this is a subject close to my heart. Migrant laborers are really the backbone of our industrial production, or even of our commercial, of our city development. Because whatever improvements or development that you see, whether it be industries or whether it be in the cities or whether it be the skyscrapers or the buildings, they are all made by these migrant laborers. So, really speaking, they contribute a very important, they have a very huge contribution in our economy and in our system. But unfortunately, they are the most neglected lot in society. So, when you talk of migrant labor, they are people who leave their own states and go to some other state invariably in looking for a better opportunity, because they don't have those opportunities back home, and they virtually are daily workers, most of them daily wagers, and they are able to make some saving which they are able to send to their homes after meeting their own requirements. So when they relocate or dislocate themselves and go to a new place for the purpose of earning a livelihood, invariably they are deprived of voting rights, because they are not the types who will be able to assert their rights and go to these offices and get their voting registration done. They invariably have difficulty in getting their Aadhaar card also, because that is not their permanent address, and it is difficult for them to establish. They have problem in opening a bank account. They have problem in also getting ration cards made. So these are those huge problems which they face, and they come and live in a completely alien city, and most of them have very, very poor living conditions. Like migrant laborers, you will find even living under sort of flyovers and very, very inhuman living conditions basically are available for them, because nobody really, because they are not the part of the organized labor, so to say, and don't get the advantage of the all the labor legislations that the country has made over a period of time. So they are completely sort of without any protection under the labor legislations. So when this lockdown was to be imposed, according to me, the fundamental right, if any, that was affected was only of the migrant laborers, because anybody other than a migrant labor was in some form or the other taken care of. One may have had problems of sort of earning less money in this period. You may have had problems of in your businesses not being able to repay your loans. You may have had problem of sort of not getting sufficient business due to the lockdown. But it did not, most of the time, did not impact these citizens to the extent that their fundamental rights under Article 21 were affected. Their life and liberty, basically their life, because a right to decent human existence is also part of Article 21. And as you would have learned in your classes so far, Article 21 is one of those articles which has slowly been expanded by the Supreme Court, and large number of things are being included in Article 21 to make life more sort of meaningful, and life more well protected, and life with no uncertainties. So the migrant labor were the real sufferers, and were the ones whose fundamental rights were the most violated, because they are daily wagers. They were daily wager. Without their daily wage, they don't have a next meal to eat. What to say of sending back home? And because of this crisis, invariably when they started moving, they didn't even have shelter. So the stories that we heard of these migrant laborers last year are very, very sort of heart-wrenching, and people dying on the railway tracks. 15, 16 of them were sleeping on the railway track, and they were run down by a train. And people in society are, some of them are so insensitive to say that why did they go and sleep on the railway track. Now, to make a comment of this kind really shows that how much lack of empathy a person can have in making such a statement. They don't go on sleep on a railway track by choice. If they were going on the roads, the police were hounding them, FIRs were being registered. So they had to find means to somehow walk back home. And the railway track probably was the only option. And probably also, I mean, I can only visualize, the railway track was the best place available for them to sleep amongst the options available to them. Probably the only place where they could get some, level ground, etc. Because you can't sleep on stones, you can't sleep on rough ground. So that must have been the plight of the migrant laborers who went and slept on those railway tracks and ultimately got crushed by a moving train. Now, as far as the judiciary is concerned, I feel very strongly that the higher judiciary, especially the Supreme Court, failed the migrant labor in a very, very big way. If you will all recall that the lockdown was announced on a 4-hour notice. Now, I'm not criticizing the Prime Minister in making a lockdown at 4-hour notice, and probably in his best judgment, he felt that that was the right action to take. Probably in those 4 hours, he couldn't have thought of all the stakeholders who would be affected in this lockdown. I'm ready to give that margin to him. So probably it must have escaped his mind that these are migrant laborers working in various places, and with the lockdown, what will happen to them? Who will take care of them? Who will give them salaries? Who will, sort of ensure that they are well taken care of with life and shelter and everything? So I give that margin to him. But when the lockdown was announced on 24th March, all this was available to the government. But after 5 days, on the 29th of March, there was a notification by the Ministry of Home Affairs, especially with regard to migrant laborers. Now, I can't give any discount to the government after 5 days when you are issuing a notification exclusively dealing with migrant laborers and banning their movement, restraining them from going from one place to the other. Now, when you have applied your mind, it's 5 days after the lockdown, and you are worried that they should not be allowed to move, then you could not have been insensitive to not think of what should be done for them at the particular place that they were. I mean, your blueprint should have been ready before you take such a drastic call of putting a complete lockdown in regard to the movement of migrant laborers. Now, 30th of March, the very next day, 2 lawyers approached the Supreme Court by a writ petition with regard to ensuring that the migrant laborers are properly taken care of. The Supreme Court on the same date issues notice for the next day, which is 31st of March. Now, this is all 1 week from the lockdown being announced. So these are very, very crucial dates as far as the pandemic is concerned. On 31st of March, the Solicitor General appears in the Supreme Court for the central government and makes a statement that at 11 a.m. today, there is not a single migrant labor on the streets. Unfortunately, that statement is accepted and the petition is closed. Now, if a Solicitor General, in my view, I mean, if the court really were to restore or think about the majesty of the court should have hauled up the Solicitor General, or at least the person who had instructed him to make this kind of a statement, as to what basis and on what backup information such a statement was made. So this Supreme Court, this is the first very big failure of the Supreme Court of India of not coming to the rescue of these migrant laborers by simply closing a statement on the basis of the Solicitor General that there is not a single migrant labor walking on the street at 11 a.m. on 31/3/2020. So that's the gravity and the the nature of the statement made before the Supreme Court. Then on the 7th of April, another petition was filed by Prashant Bhushan, where he again pleaded for the migrant laborers and said that some money should be paid to them because they are in a very, very helpless kind of a situation. Again, unfortunately, the Supreme Court refused to interfere by saying that the government is providing meals to them, then why should they be paid anything? And the averment of the council that the meals are not even edible and they are in a very helpless situation. They are not able to maintain social distancing. They are not able to send money back home, for which they come all the way. They don't come just to feed themselves into the city. They come to not only feed themselves but also send some money back home, which money is utilized by the family members of the migrant labor back home. So all these averments, contentions by the council was rejected by the Supreme Court that we can't do anything and we can't look at these issues. So according to me, this is the second very big failure of the highest court of this country. This court started the concept of PIL only for the hapless citizens of this country. Unfortunately, today PILs are being used for, one businessman trying to close down the other businessman's industry, and all kinds of people are set up to file PILs. But the real beneficiaries of a PIL, if I were to say, are the most affected and most needed for the purposes of being protected by PIL were the migrant laborers. And this was again on the 7th of April. This was once again at the statement of the Solicitor General that everything is normal, everything is taken care of, every worker is properly fed, and he is in a very rosy kind of a situation. Please appreciate that migrant laborers who were daily wagers, who were respectively earning their money, overnight became worse than prisoners. Why I say worse than prisoners? Because in prison, at least you get your 2 meals. In prison, you have a decent toilet. Here, these migrant laborers were in a situation where they had no meals, they had no toilet, they had no shelter. In a prison, at least you have a shelter. You can at least, you have a roof under your head, over your head. These migrant laborers were without a roof on their head. So that was the plight of the migrant laborers of this country. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court completely failed them, especially in these initial orders. I'm very happy to say that a large number of high courts did exceptionally well to go out of the way to look after the migrant laborers. And it is only when the high courts did something that the migrant laborers were, sort of given some relief. But later on, Supreme Court also realized that they have to do something, of course, much later that they came in. So again, the government of India, almost 1 month away after the migrant this crisis had begun and the lockdown had started, on 29th of April, almost 1 month and 6 days after the first lockdown, 5 days after the lockdown, the Union of India issued a notification for interstate movement of migrant laborers. And then they were also supposed to be having special trains to take them. But unfortunately, again, there was a huge problem of who will pay for their fares. There was no clarity on who will pay for their fares, and most of the migrant labor had to pay through their nose from whatever little savings they had by selling off whatever valuables they had to buy tickets to go back home. So that was another very, very sorry, state of affairs as far as the migrant laborers are concerned. When this permission was granted for their movement interstate and special trains were being run and they were asked to pay for their fares. On the 2nd of May, the Ministry of Railways issued guidelines for these movement of migrant laborers, and there was again no clarity on who will pay for their fares, etc. On the 5th of May, a former Director General of Police, Dr. Vikram Singh, filed a PIL in Supreme Court saying that please quash all the criminal cases registered against the migrant laborers for having violated the Disaster Management Act, for having been found walking on the streets. There were, according to Dr. Vikram Singh, there were about 75,000 cases foisted against these migrant laborers. So just imagine the misery of these laborers, that they are without shelter, without food, without any remuneration, walking back home, dying on the way, and also being foisted with criminal cases for violating the Disaster Management Act. So firstly, you don't take care of them, provide nothing for them, and then you start registering criminal cases. So he said that what will happen to these criminal cases? These criminal cases will be a blot on these individuals all their lives, and it will be impossible for them to come out of this blot. Again, the Supreme Court dismissed the petition, saying that we can't do anything. If they are on the streets, then they have to face criminal charges. So that is the height of insensitivity shown by the highest court of this country as far as migrant laborers are concerned, by rejecting a PIL filed by a former DGP of police. Then again, on the 11th of May, the Home Secretary again, for the first time, some empathy was shown, and the Home Secretary, Government of India, directed that every migrant labor, wherever he is, should be provided proper shelter and should be given access to transportation to go back home. Even then, in fact, I had suggested in several of my tweets and also in my messages to some of the high functionaries, I don't want to name them like this in a show.
No, sir,
and I requested them that they should be given special buses should be run for them. So trains were not a proper option, and they should be sent from point to point. But again, nothing happened. So this 11th May also permitting them or asking this to be done for them was really an empty formality. Then again, on the 11th of May, 15th of May, another bench of Supreme Court refused to entertain a petition seeking a direction to the district magistrate to identify migrant labor and provide shelter and food to them. Supreme Court said that we can't intervene in this again. So that was not done again. Then the Union Home Secretary on the 16th of May. So just imagine, for every minute for these migrant labor was like hell, every minute. And they suffered this for almost 2 months. And only for the first time on the 26th of May, which is full 2 months and 2 days after the lockdown started, that the Supreme Court, after a lot of criticism by several, I was civil society members and by some senior advocates, including I was also amongst the 20 signatories on the 25th of May, that the 26th of May, probably because our signature of 20 senior advocates, that the Supreme Court started a suo motu petition saying in the problems and miseries of migrant labor. Now, this petition came too late, and by the time the miseries had already happened, and it was almost next to impossible to restore what they had lost all this while. In this petition, for the first time, Supreme Court on the 28th of May, so 2 months and about 5 days of the lockdown, issued these directions that no fare will be charged from these migrant laborers. The migrant labor will be provided shelter and given all kinds of facilities. They were to be taken on these trains. They were to be provided meals. Then they will be, all the red tape will be removed as far as their movement is concerned. So this is the first time that the Supreme Court actually realized that it has really fumbled in dealing with migrant laborers and in not protecting their fundamental rights when they needed it most. Nobody can predict, this kind of a pandemic. Nobody can predict what all can happen in a pandemic of this nature. But when you realize that there is a section of society or section of the citizenry who are in such dire conditions, then to rise to the occasion to ensure that some help be given to them, if that is delayed, then that is really the failure of the system, I would say. I always believe in this theory that the level of civilization is always developed by how well you take care of the helpless members. So if you are not able to take care of the helpless members, and if there is no protection given to them, your civilization has somehow degenerated. And I must tell you on this webinar today that a lot of citizens groups, gurdwaras, they did some human service to these migrant labor cause. They were providing foods. I mean, we all contributed, and everybody in a small or a big way contributed to some NGO or the other who was providing food and some kind of shelter and some kind of. These migrant laborers didn't have even chappals to wear, so they were walking, bare feet. And that was summertime. You can imagine on a street, on a road which is at 40-45 degrees temperature, your feet start burning. Some of them used to tie a some kind of a some cloth or something onto their feet to save their feet from burning. So that was the very, very severe plight of the migrant laborers, and the civil society and some of these organizations like the Gurdwaras did some amazing job for this country, and that really restores the confidence of the common man of this country that all is not lost, and there are definitely people who are taking care of, who are ready to take care and ready to give their bit in ensuring that the migrant laborers, their miseries be brought down to some extent. Miseries could not have been taken away, but miseries be brought down to some extent. So that is what happened in those days. And then on 9th of June, the Supreme Court again passed some very important directions of running of Shramik trains and return of the migrants to their hometown, preparation of skill register in their hometown to enable local administration to utilize their service for public work, and similarly other welfares of for the migrant laborers. So this all happened, but it was too far too late. By 2.5 months after the lockdown and the suffering of the migrant laborers, this kind of an order. Of course, I will not say that this was not required. Of course, this was required, and definitely it has to be appreciated. But it came too late as far as the migrant laborers are concerned. Then, even in the case of Maharashtra, in 31st of July, Supreme Court passed a very detailed judgment on the question of how migrants should file their compliances, how the state should file their compliances with three beneficial legislations for the migrant labor. Now there is an Interstate Migrant Workers Regulation and Employment Conditions of Service Act 1979, and there is a Construction Workers Regularization and Employment and Conditions of Service Act 1996, and there is an Unorganized Workers Social Security Act 2008. Now, I must tell all of you today that these are three pieces of legislation mainly supposed to be for these migrant laborers and for these unorganized workforce of this country. But they are the least implemented legislations probably of this country even till today. I mean, there is no body enforcing these legislations, and nothing has happened in these legislations till now. So Supreme Court also on this date said, 31st of July, that the compliances of all the three legislations be done forthwith. Now, it is probably only after the direction of the Supreme Court that the authorities realized for the first time that there are such legislations to look at the plight of the unorganized sector in this country. Because till now, because there is no implementation, there is no, it's only if at all, whatever implementation is there as far as these three legislations are concerned, it is only on paper, and there is no actual implementation on ground. Then on 1st of September 1990, then the court again directed the state of Maharashtra and Delhi to file their affidavit, which actually they have till yet not done. And then thereafter, the matter has not been heard because Supreme Court also unfortunately has not started normal hearings. So Supreme Court has been doing only very limited hearings. So Supreme Court could not take up these issues thereafter. And if you all will remember, after October of last year, things started suddenly looking as if things are getting much, much better. And by December and January, people forgot that there was a pandemic and there could be a second wave as well. And that is how the people of this country let their guards down. And today we are in a second wave, which is far more deadlier, far more worse than the first wave. Today we are losing people by the. I mean, as a president of the Supreme Court bar, I am losing by members by the dozens every day. And if there are more than a dozen of my members dying every day, I can very well imagine how many people would actually be dying in the country, because probably, according to me, the reporting is not proper, and the deaths that are being reported are not the complete picture as far as the migrant labor is concerned. If you ask me, this is one section of society for which there needs to be, firstly, a very proper implementation of those three legislations which I just referred to you about, so that when they relocate anywhere or they go to work anywhere, they are probably properly understood as a regular workforce for that area, with certain legal rights and states having obligations towards them. Unfortunately, because these legislations are not being implemented in true spirit, they are only an empty, piece of legislation with no benefit to the migrant laborers. So this is aggravating the plight of these migrant workers. And in normal times, these migrant workers are not really very bothered, because they have, they get their daily wage and they're able to eat their 2 meals, they're able to sleep, and they're able to send a little money back home. But when this gets disrupted, when this cycle gets disrupted of not getting your daily wage, of not being able to take your 2 meals, or if your shelter going away, or if you are forced to be on the streets, then you can imagine the plight of these migrant laborers. So the numbers of migrant labor, there is some statistics which I have just tried to pull out. The total migrant labor as of 2011, which is the last census, we have 45.6 crore migrants in 2011. Now, this is almost 38% of the 2011 population, 38%, which is a very big number. And these migrant laborers, as I mentioned in the start of my address, really are responsible for the industry running properly, for the skyscrapers being constructed, for the construction industry, for the road industry. I remember in one of my trips to Leh, I was driving down on the road on a barren piece of road, going to nowhere, and I saw some young men on the roadside, laborer type working. So I just stopped to inquire for them as to how they are doing and where do they belong to. And I was surprised that even in a remote area like Leh, both these workers were from Bihar. So they go all this distance just to get a few extra rupees per day for themselves, which they can, take care of their daily needs and save some money to send back home. So these numbers are actually mind-boggling, to have 45.6 crore migrant laborers. Now, between 2001 and 2011, while the population grew by 18%, the number of migrants increased by 45%. So if the population only increased by 18%, the number of migrants increased by 45%. So you can understand by 2021, which is the next census due, I don't know when it will happen, because this 2021 census has been completely suspended now for more than a year. And I don't think that we could have that census ready maybe for another 3 or 4 years, the way this pandemic has come in and the way we are likely to get a second wave and a third wave. I mean, we are going through the second wave and there'll be a third wave. So with our experience of last year and this problem having again started this year of lockdowns, and one really doesn't know what all will be locked down and whether we will have the same kind of lockdown as last year or we'll have more of local lockdowns like this year. You will see Delhi has gone in lockdown. A lot of states are going in partial lockdown. So ultimately, any lockdown, whether it be partial or full lockdown, the work of the migrant labor always gets affected. It is impossible to ensure that the migrant labor is taken care of in a lockdown situation. So as you will all see that, you must be reading in the papers that in the last 10 days or so, there is a lot of movement of migrant labor already started, because they know with experience of last year that suddenly things can go from very bad to worse. And if this same situation again comes this year, then having the experience of last year, they don't want to be caught napping and with all the same problems of last year. So migrant laborers, to my knowledge, in fact, till today, the entire migrant workforce has not even come back to the cities. And a large number of them have realized that even if they cannot earn something for the family, at least they'll be alive if they stay back at home. At least they'll be alive, because at least whatever little money they are able to earn there, the cost of living invariably in a village is much lesser than what you end up paying when you relocate yourself to a big city. So that cost of living being lower, you can always maintain yourself. So the migrant labor now will after this pandemic is over. I'm not talking about now. After this pandemic is fully over, maybe 1 year, 1.5 years, or 2 years down the line, there will be a problem of these workers ever coming back to the city. So a large population or percentage of migrant laborers who have gone back to the villages will try and do something there rather than come back to the cities. But the other disturbing news that I'm getting in the recent past is that this pandemic, for the first time in the second wave, is actually moving to the villages. Now, if it goes to the villages, and the way it has affected the cities as of now, with the very poor health infrastructure of our country, I really, dread what is going to happen to them in the villages. Because if this pandemic, the way it is growing in the cities, in the villages, it will almost be next to impossible to maintain social distancing. So in the last phase, the first phase of the pandemic, although the pandemic was quite widespread in the cities, one did not hear of much of the pandemic going into the villages. Probably because the migration of these workers happened into the villages a little later than when the pandemic started. So probably they didn't go infected, etc. But now the second wave that has started, the virus that is presently in this country is so virulent and it spreads so easily that it may, take over the entire country very soon. And if that will happen, I really, really can't say what will happen to the working class of this country, especially in the villages. But we have to all keep praying and pray to God that it doesn't get as bad as one can, sort of think of at the time. And there is some mercy to our people from this pandemic, and we can see better days soon. We also hope that the vaccination, you must have all heard, I don't know whether you read the newspapers or not, but yesterday the Supreme Court took up this vaccination issue. And there was a discussion on the cost of vaccination. So it's my view that, and Israel has proved it successful. Israel bought the Pfizer vaccine double the price at which Pfizer was giving to selling it to anybody else. And somebody said, "Why are you spending this kind of money for vaccinating the entire population of the country?" The Prime Minister said that 3 days of lockdown will be enough to take care of this additional money that I'm spending. So our country has to rise to this occasion. The Supreme Court has said that if at 150 rupees the vaccine was being provided with a certain amount of profit already built in, as was stated by Adar Purawala in his interview with Vishnu Som on NDTV on the 6th of April, then there is no reason why everybody, even the state governments and the private sector, also not be given the vaccine at 150 rupees, because the numbers will give them the profit, really speaking. You don't require, and mind you, this vaccine has been developed with a certain amount of funding by the government of India in the research and development. So ultimately, the only way forward for this country is that we are able to vaccinate the villages at the earliest. And that is the only way to protect the workers of this country, who are really the strength of this country. Today, this country is a superpower because of our young workforce, because of our working hands, and most of the West having a much more elderly population, with a working the younger population, the working population numbers getting much lower as a percentage of the total population. That we as a young workforce can provide workers to the entire world. So we don't want our workers to be adversely affected at any cost of at any cost. And the priority of the government should be, and that is what the Supreme Court has emphasized yesterday, that we should vaccinate our entire population at the earliest, so that this pandemic can be, we can grow out of this pandemic and redevelop our country or rebuild our country from where we had when the pandemic had started. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was a very fantastic session. You have elaborated date-wise date all in the first lockdown period, how the migrant workers have been taken out and how they have suffered. So it was a very fantastic session, sir. Sir, we have certain few questions from our Master of Law students. Sir, question number 1 is that, was India in the violation of the International Labour Organization protocol during the first lockdown?
To be honest, I haven't examined it from the international protocol, so I can't comment. It will not be fair for me to comment on that.
Okay. Sir, second question, sir. Because the migrant workers are mostly from the Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, so why the government have not provided the special vehicle for these workforce to reshift to their places? So what is the reason behind the government? Why central government is not providing the facility they have provided at a later stage? So what is the consequences? What the government should take care in this situation, sir?
So from the experience of last year, I would say the government was insensitive, or government had very poor planning as far as the migrant labor is concerned. But in this pandemic, the second wave, I'm sure the government, with the wisdom of whatever they had not done last time, they should make proper arrangement for movement of migrant labor, so that migrant laborers, if they go back for saving themselves from the pandemic, they should also be given an opportunity and the facility to come back when the pandemic wanes, so that
yes,
the work in this country does not suffer.
Sir, do you think that one more question from one of the student of the PhD? Do you think that in this pandemics the situation is more worse than the first lockdown? So what the government should, what is the planning of the government should be there for these migrant workers in this second wave of the pandemic?
Well, the second wave, as I said earlier, last year when the lockdown happened, there were only 500 confirmed cases. And when we opened the lockdown and the lockdown was removed, we had some 1 or 2 lakh cases. Now our cases are into 60, 70 lakhs. So probably the government has realized that lockdown, full-scale lockdown is not the right way forward. Then the only way forward is to vaccinate the country. So the way forward, according to me, is to start this immunization program like the universal immunization program by immediately vaccinating the entire population of this country, by ensuring that the vaccines move very fast and get injected also very fast. That is the only way to save, because even a single dose gives a lot of protection. And the problem is not the numbers that are dying. The numbers that are dying in this country as a percentage of the people who are affected is still very, very low. Our problem is that our health infrastructure is not sufficient to handle the numbers who are falling sick today. So if you are able to vaccinate, the numbers who are falling sick will be so low that the hospital infrastructure will not be stretched, and the deaths will be very few.
Sir, one more question. Right now in Delhi, we have lots of cases in this lockdown, and various people are died. Sir, in this situation, sir, there are certain injections which are not provided. So now, though this migrant workers who do not have a money, how they will purchase? Whether the government is providing this remdesivir injections in a free of cost, or whether they are providing in a means if suppose a migrant worker is admitted in the hospital, whether the beds are provided to them. So who will because the calculation which is shown on the media is not totally clear to us, sir. So one of the student has written, and he asked this question to you, sir, because you know the factual circumstances at Delhi, you know better than us, sir.
Well, it's a very, very distressing position in Delhi. I am not able to, as president of the Supreme Court Bar, and with all my, connections, and with all my,
yes, sir.
I am not able to get beds for my members.
Okay.
So if you're not able to get beds for your members, my Supreme Court Bar Association members, even senior advocates, some of the big senior advocates, today for about 3 hours, there was a complete mayhem in the legal community. One of our senior advocates, Dr. Rajiv Dhawan, needed an oxygen bed, and there was no oxygen bed. With great difficulty, after 3 hours, we could get him a bed at the Apollo Hospital. So that is the kind of situation we are facing. Yes, so where is the question of your migrant labor getting any bed in Delhi today? Ordinary citizen is not getting any bed today, and there are no oxygens in hospitals also. That's another very big problem.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. It was a very fantastic session. You have elaborated the factual substance. You have not hidden anything. You have given the total data fact in a very clear way, that what is the situation at Delhi and what is the situation to the migrant workers in the first lockdown and in the second wave, sir. So we on this platform, sir, we are thankful to you, sir, for interacting, for for accepting this offer of the webinar. And sir, we would like to invite you whenever this pandemic is over at Gujarat, at Vadodara, sir. And sir, because this university is very big university, and we are developing at a very fast growing. Even though our president is he is very young at 32 years age, and he want that no. And even though when our situation is worst, every employees are getting the full salary, not even if they are working at from home also, sir. So this is the situation which our president is totally devoted for our employees, and he do not want any cut short of any single penny of rupees from the salary from any of the staff.
That's
so on this occasion, sir, I am very much thankful to you, sir. And whenever this pandemic is over, we will like to invite you, sir. Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot for this giving a special time to us, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.
Pranam, sir. Pranam, sir.